Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So we're going to start the SIDS event, Better Data for a Better Tourism in SIDS, which is part of the official agenda of the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States, charting the course towards resilient prosperity, which is currently taking place in Antigua and Barbuda. And the SIDS event is co-organized by UN Tourism with Japan International Cooperation Agency, International Monetary Fund, Oxford SDG Impact Lab, Catalytic Finance Foundation, and Pegasus Capital Advisors. Before starting the event itself, some housekeeping rules. Please note that we are recording the SIDS event. You're kindly requested to rename yourselves to your name and organization. Your microphones will remain muted during the session, but we welcome you to share your comments in the chat and include your questions in the question and answers feature. We will try to answer as many as possible during the event. And in the chat, we're going to include also the link to the program of the SIDS event, in case you don't have the latest version, and which is also posted in the landing page of the event in the Tourism for SDGs platform. So the event will explore frameworks and tools to comprehensively measure tourism's impact, dependencies, and growth beyond GDP, fostering informed decision-making for its sustainable advancement. It will also emphasize the role of data and measurements in tracking progress and ensuring the alignment of tourism initiatives with broader policy objectives, motivate tourism sector public and private stakeholders to achieve real sustainability by focusing on the social, environmental, and governance aspects of the sector. We will have 2 panels with very interesting and inspiring presentations. Our panelists will share the work they are developing, as well as some key recommendations that will be shared with the SIDS Conference Secretariat at the end. We hope to inspire action for the tourism sector in SIDS to embrace a more resilient, inclusive, innovative, and sustainable development model aligned with the 2030 Agenda and the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS AWAS. Please feel free to share your own recommendations in the chat and help us to build a good outcome document. So dear participants, without further ado, let's start the discussions. Allow me to introduce you my colleague, Ms. Clara van der Poel, the Director in Function of the Statistics Standards and Data Department of UN Tourism. With over 15 years of experience in tourism statistics working for the World Tourism Organization, Clara is currently the Director of the Statistics Standards and Data Department. Her work focuses on the development and promotion of international standards in close liaison with countries with the United Nations system. She also leads the department's activities in capacity development and in the collection and dissemination of data sets, working narrowly with UN Tourism Committee on Statistics and the expert group on measuring the sustainability of tourism. Clara represents UN Tourism in various committees and experts groups, including the United Nations Statistical Commission, the Committee of the Coordination of Statistical Activities, the UN Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting. Clara, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for that very nice introduction to this fantastic session. Allow me just to check with you whether you can see my screen properly before I proceed.
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much. So indeed, I have a pleasure today to introduce a fantastic lineup of speakers, as you will see on the screen. In this first panel, a 360-degree approach to measuring tourism sustainability. First up, we will have Ms. Alessandra Alfieri, Assistant Director at the Statistics Department of the International Monetary Fund. Next, we will have Mr. and Professor Edward Brooks, co-founder of the SDG Impact Lab of the University of Oxford. And finally, we will have Mr. Yon Saotome, a Deputy Director General and Group Director for Private Sector Development at the Economic Development Department of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. But first, I've been asked to help set the scene a little bit for their interventions. And what better way to do that than through some numbers, right? So tourism is a major economic pillar. before COVID-19, it represented around 4% of global GDP, or about half the economic weight of agriculture worldwide. And in some small island developing states, the share of tourism in national economies was often even much higher. With the COVID pandemic, of course, tourism came to a halt. Millions of jobs and businesses were put at risk, and tourism's capacity to generate and spread prosperity recoiled considerably. Now, we have available data for the European Union, for example, which shows that the loss in tourism accounted for 184 billion of the 440 billion drop in gross value added. And this is about 42% of total lost prosperity from lost tourism activity alone. So that is enormous, of course. And unfortunately, we do not have this kind of information for the SIDS because the lack of data is hampering this analysis. Now, we can all fathom the scale of the lost opportunity that reduced tourism had on many of these economies. But without the data, it's impossible to properly assess, and thus very difficult to take forward-looking action. The data that we do have shows that tourism is a significant share of also trade in many SIDS economies. Tourism is a crucial source of foreign income, accounting for over 50% of total exports in a majority of the SIDS. And in some cases, as you will see on the screen, even higher than 80% of total export earnings come from tourism. Now, tourism also generates jobs and supports livelihoods in many SIDS. And among the SIDS with available data, we see that tourism's share of total employment was indeed very high. Tourism also provides opportunities for women, which accounts for over half the workforce in a majority of the SIDS. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all enjoy tourism, and we have seen instances of tourism being more sustainable or less so. Tourism is increasingly relevant in national agendas for its role in propelling economic opportunities, social inclusiveness, cultural exchange, and peace building, while motivating the protection of cultural and natural assets. And the potential of tourism to support or deter efforts towards sustainable development has been recognized at the highest level, including the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. It is goals 8, 12, and 14 that explicitly capture sustainable tourism, as well as the need to monitor it. And so to harness the full potential of tourism as a force for good, we must first harness the power of data. Statistics is an inherent part of our mandate at UN Tourism as a specialized UN agency. And so we have been very honored to, over the past 7 years, be able to accompany an international effort towards measuring the sustainability of tourism. Now, in essence, this Measuring the Sustainability of Tourism program is what we could say a 360-degree approach to measuring tourism. It integrates the key dimensions of sustainability, allowing us to measure and understand tourism as an inherent part of our economic, social, and environmental systems, so that we can better steer a sector that works for people, planets, and prosperity. MSD applies to the international, national, and subnational scales, thus fostering a more harmonized and meaningful metrics to help ensure that the action on the ground taking place is indeed properly aligned with broader national and international policy objectives. And it is through a multidisciplinary approach and a co-design process that bridges the data and the policy communities that MSD is able to provide guidance for producing data that is not only relevant to policy and to managers, but that is also feasible within existing statistical infrastructures. Now, the development of the statistical framework for MSD is the result of a large collective process, as I mentioned, that spanned 7 years and involved over 40 countries, more than 30 international and regional organizations, subnational authorities, academic institutions, and the private sector. And after years of research and development, consensus building, and also testing the framework in countries, the United Nations Statistical Commission endorsed the framework earlier this year. And this makes MST the internationally agreed reference framework for measuring key economic, social, and environmental aspects of tourism. This framework has also been recognized by the Chief Executive's Board of the UN as a living example of moving beyond GDP to value what counts. The framework has been implemented in 29 countries so far, as I mentioned, as part of this development process and testing in countries, including two SIDS, Fiji and Samoa, where they have focused on the parts most feasible and most relevant to their policy and circumstances. And MST has also been incorporated in various policy instruments, including the Pacific Sustainable Tourism Policy Framework and its accompanying statistical strategy that incorporates MST-based indicators. But the work continues. We have this internationally agreed standard now, which is an important step towards more holistic, more comparable, and more trusted data. And of course, SIDS stand to benefit enormously from its implementation, but they will require support in working together to overcome some important barriers. We have gaps in basic data, the challenge of accessing financing for data, the building and retaining of capacities, the need for data disaggregation and granularity, and also a coordinated access to data that often sits across different institutions are just some of the challenges to consider. And so with this being said, allow me to introduce or come back to our three speakers who will delve a little further in how they are confronting some of these challenges and the excellent work that they are doing. So, Ms. Alessandra Alfieri, the MST is dedicated to bridging the data gap on climate change to support evidence-based economic decision-making. The Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS declaration highlights the significant challenges that the SIDS face in data collection, in technical expertise, and in institutional capacity, which hinder effective progress monitoring. What is the IMF doing to fill these data gaps? And how can measuring the sustainability of tourism serve as a catalyst to utilize these tools?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Clara, for the question and for the opportunity to present that the work that the IMF is doing in this space. I'm going to share my screen and use presentation. Do you see everything? Do you see the presentation mode?
Perfect.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's really an honor to be part of this event, and I really would like to congratulate Clara and the UN Tourism for their leadership in pushing forward the measuring of sustainability of tourism. I was involved in my previous capacity at the UN, where I worked there for over 30 years in the UN Statistics Division and worked very closely with Clara on this. Now I moved to the IMF, where basically we recently started a program on the environment and climate change statistics. And I mean, of course, the measuring of sustainability of tourism is very much at the center, in particular for the small island development states. So basically, in recent year, this has increasingly become on the agenda, on the policy agenda, that climate change has become an existential threat to long-term growth and sustainability. So what the IMF has done, actually in 2021, they have released a climate strategy with the objective of providing high-quality, granular, and tailored advice to the membership on macroeconomic and financial policy challenges related to climate change. So what has happened is that the IMF has continued increasingly to integrate the climate change in its regular activities. So this that are usually, I mean, that are structured into this 4, let's say, main work stream. One is on surveillance and analytical work. With surveillance here, basically we mean that the policy providing countries with policy recommendation that are macroeconomic and financial stability policy recommendation, and here climate has been introduced as one of the main component of this assistance. The capacity development program is fundamental because we are dealing with issues that are quite new, especially when we are talking to central banks and the Ministry of Finance. And of course, data is at the center of it. And I will say a little bit more on the data work that the IMF is doing in the context of climate change. And on the lending side, so the IMF has actually launched in 2022 this Resilience and Sustainability Fund, which is an initiative which is designed to assist countries, especially vulnerable and middle income and low income countries, in addressing long-term structural challenges that pose macroeconomic risks. And these challenges are not limited to climate change, adaptation and mitigation, but also to pandemics. And COVID also appeared in Clara's slides. And of course, the IMF is not really, as part of its core responsibility, does not really have climate in it. So it has to work with other agencies. And it's working very closely with, of course, with the World Bank, with the United Nations, OECD, Eurostat, and so on, with all other international agencies in trying to provide assistance to countries that are facing increasingly climate change issues. So on the data side, the work program of the IMF is structured along, let's say, 4 main or 3 main work streams. One is data, and in the context of data, we have the climate indicator dashboard. So we bring together data, climate data from different sources, and we kind of link it to the macroeconomy and to the financial data. So basically, the uniqueness of this dashboard is providing this link between the climate change and the economy. The second part is the second pillar is the capacity development. Of course, capacity development is the bread and butter of the IMF work. And at the moment, we are supporting 10 countries in basically developing or strengthening their statistical system to be able to develop data that supports policy, in particular macroeconomic policy and financial stability. But this now the capacity development program moving forward will integrate a component on climate change. It will become part of the regular support that we provide to countries together with, let's say, the implementation of the system of national accounts, balance of payment statistics, monetary finance statistics. There will be a specific component on climate change. So this is basically indicates that the IMF is really serious in supporting countries to obtain the necessary data to address climate change. The third pillar is on statistical methodology. I mean, the system of national accounts and the balance of payments manuals are being updated and will be released next March. And the idea is to try to include as much as possible issues related to environment and climate into these standards. And of course, there will be then new standards or standards that are being, the update is being launched. And this is the system of environmental economic accounts, which is basically a complement of the system of national accounts to measure the relationship between the economy and the environment. And it's very closely, the MST includes a strong component for what concerns the relationship between tourism and the environment. Very closely linked to this manual. And also the government finance statistics manual and the monetary finance statistics manual will be updated and the update has been launched now. And the objective is that all these 3 manuals will include a strong component on measuring climate change. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is the Data Gaps Initiative, which basically the governors of central banks and the Ministry of Finance agreed that there are significant data gaps related in particular related to climate change. And last year they actually agreed to address these data gaps. And they have agreed on the 7 recommendations related to climate. So these relate to the first, let's say, 3 recommendations are more linked to the space of mitigation. So they are mostly relevant for countries that have actually contributed a lot to the emissions of greenhouse gases. So they relate to measuring the greenhouse gas emissions, linking it to the economic activity. So we are looking at accounts. Greenhouse gas accounts, energy accounts, carbon footprints, and carbon footprints of foreign direct investment. The recommendation 4 has to do more with climate finance. So how do we actually finance the activities related to both mitigation and adaptation? So what are the different instruments? The recommendation 5, which I'm going to focus on, is on physical and transition risks indicators. Recommendation 6 is on identifying government climate impacting subsidies, and the recommendation 7 is linked to expenditures. It's basically is to identify what is the financing needs, the financing gap that is needed to address climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now, focusing on the forward-looking physical and transition risks, which are particularly relevant for small island development states, I'd like just to basically mention quickly what we are doing. So the framework, the statistical framework for measuring physical and transition risks is basically has to do with integrating hazards, exposure, and vulnerabilities with climate scenarios. And the objective here, so when we talk about hazards, we talk at the occurrence of events like floods, storms, extreme weather, or transition-related events like, for example, policy measures. So how to deal with changes that require investments to address the issue of climate change. Exposures are more have to do with the presence in place that could be adversely affected. So this could be people, could be buildings and structures, or could be the effects on, for example, bank loans. And vulnerability is more the propensity or predisposition to be adversely affected. So the whole idea is basically trying to understand the risks to the economy and the financial sector of climate-related disasters using projected hazards as estimated by the IPCC. So the objective here is really to obtain data which is spatially explicit so that we can direct investment where these risks are likely to be located. And this could be, for example, in building more resilient infrastructure, or investing, for example, in ecosystem restoration to basically mitigate the impacts of floods, for example. So, I mean, here, this is an example of Jamaica. We actually used here commercial data from Jupiter. And the idea is looking at the impact of tropical hazards, which according to the IPCC estimates are increasing over time. And also looking at the impacts in the future, but also looking at the airport's location to basically try to understand what would be the impact on the airport's location. And this type of analysis can also be done overlaying the wind speed with, let's say, where hotels are located, where most of the tourists are going to be, and then what would be the impact on these structures And most importantly, then what would be the impact on the economy and on the people that are actually, I mean, either working in these places or living in these places. So what we are actually now trying to do as a statistics department, we are trying to develop a layer using open source building footprint from Google Open Building, understanding where the buildings and structures are located, but also looking at the heights of these buildings and structures, and then overlaying it with the hazards in trying to basically estimate what would be the impact of these hazards on buildings and structures, which, I mean, in this case could also be hotels. So what is important here is that national countries, I mean, our idea is to overlay this, to identify different layers, also using national data sets. So if there is, for example, geolocated information on hotels or on beaches, for example, then we could actually estimate what would be the impact in physical terms, but also eventually on the macroeconomic terms of these hazards. So for the next steps, what we are doing is leveraging global data sets, because often countries do not really have information on this at this level of detail. So we could use global data sets and develop a tool that integrates different layers of hazards and exposures to identify the hotspots for risks. And the idea would be then to develop policies to try to mitigate these risks. So where should we actually invest, and what are the best actions to take given the situation? So we are using the ARIES, which is the Artificial Intelligence for Environment and Sustainability tool, which basically is a tool that allows to integrate different layers and different models to basically try to estimate these risks. And we are doing this in collaboration with several international agencies. The World Bank has a climate change knowledge portal, which has some of these hazards in spatially explicit information. The European Space Agency, the BAS Center for Climate Change, also now we are discussing with the UN World Meteorological Organization, which provides the basic data that serves as input in the IPCC models, and I mean, and many others. So the objective here is to try to support countries to develop these estimates of physical and transition risks using global data sets, but then improve on those using national data where available. Thank you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. And indeed, it always is a pleasure to work and to learn with you. And it's amazing how the IMF's statistics department is at the forefront of innovative work that expose not only the complexity of the issues we have before us, but also aims to fill that need for higher richness in the data that is required to face them. So now we move on to Mr. Edward Brooks from the University of Oxford's SDG Impact Lab. Ed, it's wonderful to have you with us. You have also been quite innovative and pioneering. You have established a very different governance model at the University of Oxford through precisely this SDG Impact Lab, and it's helping to shape also cutting-edge developments, including a project on developing a harmonized ESG framework for tourism businesses. So we're very much looking forward to hearing more about that, and also your thoughts on partnerships and how they can help to bring about meaningful transformation for tourism in the SIDS.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Clara. What a privilege to be here and to be able to contribute to this really important side event, and to be considering this theme on the importance of data when it comes to advancing sustainable tourism. Thanks also, Alessandra. That's fantastic to hear about your work there, your leading work at the IMF. And I'm looking forward to learning more and following up on that also. So I'm here at the University of Oxford, where I co-founded and co-direct our SDG Impact Lab. 3 years ago, we considered as a university what was needed to advance the SDGs and what we could contribute as an institution focused on research and focused on education. And as we considered, of course, you need leadership to advance the SDGs, governments through policy, business through innovation, all the partnerships that go with those, with citizens and beyond. And here our role is in education. We have the privilege to educate a new generation of leaders and thinkers through our university. But also, there's this essential importance of data, and that's where the research component comes in. We need data on the challenges, leadership then to address those challenges, and then data on the effect, measurement to track progress, ensure alignment with objectives. And here is our 360: leadership, but data on the challenges that leaders can take and implement, data on the effect, and then we can carry on and the cycle can proceed. But of course, the data needs to be there. We need to be able to close the data gaps. We need to be able to have accurate data and information. The data needs to be consolidated and shared and made usable. It needs to be analyzed well, and so on. And it's our real pleasure and privilege to be able to join in these tremendous efforts. Clara outlined the superb work of UN Tourism with the MST framework, and we've had the privilege of partnering with UN Tourism ourselves as well in this important sector. So what about tourism? Well, we've come to tourism, and from the outset of our work at the SDG Lab here at the university, tourism has been a key sector for two reasons. One, tourism is an important sector societally, economically, environmentally. We've been considering the existential threat that is climate change. Tourism in 2019 was responsible for 8% of GHG emissions around the world. There's a massive environmental impact, but more broadly than GHG emissions, of course, on resource depletion, biodiversity, and so on, and social issues add to this, low wage employment, many others as well. And there's a particular importance, as you know, for small island and developing states where tourism is often a massive part of the economy. So tourism's a hugely important sector, but of course a really complex sector as well. It actually spans a number of different sectors, which all then come into play and relate to each other. It's contextual. There are different forms of tourism in different parts of the world, even within different countries. It's cyclical, it's transnational. There are multiple interdependencies. It is a very complex system. There is lots of data, absolutely, but the data is dispersed. It's dispersed across governments, it's dispersed across non-governmental bodies, charitable bodies, but also businesses. To be useful, we need this accurate data collected, analyzed, consolidated, and that's where some important partnerships can come in here. We need frameworks to be developed, those frameworks to be mobilized to drive action. As we've heard, the UN Tourism Group, led by Clara, has an amazing work here with the MST framework, measuring sustainability in tourism, which is organizing structure for the integration of statistics across economic, environmental, social dimensions of tourism, right across these key SDG areas. We've been privileged to partner with Clara and the team, particularly thinking about the piece of this puzzle which relates to the private sector, to businesses that play such a key part in tourism around the world. And particularly, we've been working together to develop an ESG framework then for tourism businesses, an ESG framework for tourism businesses. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. It's an acronym that has come to the fore in global business as ESG reporting is gaining prominence across all sectors due to regulatory pressures, due to investor expectations, due to consumers and their awareness and pressures, of course, particularly on environmental concerns, but right across these different areas. Currently, the tourism sector employs various different ESG reporting mechanisms. Businesses report against various different frameworks. What does this mean? It means there are discrepancies in standards. There's a hampering effect of effective comparison when it comes to corporate actions. And so our work has been to develop a harmonized ESG reporting framework tailored to tourism businesses, encompassing specific performance indicators, specific standards, in order to streamline the reporting processes, in order to enhance stakeholder comprehension and understanding, in order to facilitate industry-wide collaboration, private sector to private sector, private sector, public sector, towards sustainable solutions. There's an incredible team working here together, led by Laura Ballerini, who's here on the call, based in Madrid, and working with colleagues here at Oxford, Dr. Amy Booth, Paula Fajardo, and Buntu Fantezo, who are leading forward in this second phase of the project that we're embarking on right at the moment. What have we done so far? Well, in the first phase, over the last 18 months, our team have developed a list of standardized indicators to harmonize the measurement of tourism companies' sustainability efforts. Laura and the team have engaged in online and in-person research across 6 countries, with over 30 tourism companies engaged, from small companies to multinational enterprises, a broad work of stakeholder engagement. Now, as we head into this next phase, this subsequent phase, we're really refining that list of indicators, refining the reporting tools, testing these with new companies and in new geographies and new tourism industries, for example, transportation, food and beverage, sport and recreational activities. The first phase focused mostly on the hospitality industry, that is the subset of the subsector within tourism. We are creating, together with UN Tourism and ESG Advisory Board, to steer and inform the next phases of the project. And we hope to finalize the first draft of this ESG framework by the end of 2024. The overarching objective is to contribute to the establishment of standardized UN tourism-backed ESG framework for the entire tourism industry, which can advance collective action within global tourism and contribute to a more environmentally conscious and socially responsible future. So yes, it's a data project at its core, but data projects are essential in order for that collective action to come together, that leadership that is needed, we believe, to make the change. I'll pause there. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and looking forward to the discussion. Clara, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed. And indeed, it's about making data strategic, right? So thank you very much for that. It's a pleasure to work with you and the team at the University of Oxford. Now, we've had a look at public sector data. You touched upon private sector data, and now we're moving on to project level data with Mr. Yoon Sao-Tome. Before you proceed, I have to be conscious of time. We are running a little bit late. So thank you very much for staying within the allocated time. And allow me to also remind the 3 speakers that I will be coming back to you with one recommendation that you will be making to the SIDS government upon finalization of this panel. But first, Mr. Yoon Sao-Tome, JICA recognizes tourism as a powerful driver for sustainable development already for many years. JICA has supported development projects across different countries, collaborating with government counterparts, the private sector, academia, civil society, and international development partners. How does JICA assess the impact of the projects it implements to promote sustainable tourism in SIDS?
So thank you very much, Clara, for your good introduction, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all of you joining. Currently, Japan is almost 11 o'clock at night, and I'm in a very dark room. And sorry that my face is not showing up clearly, but I hope you can see me. And let me introduce the work that we have been doing for 4 years with partnership with UN Tourism. And thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to introduce this toolkit on this great side event. And I would like to jump into the PowerPoint presentation. And my name is Jun Sao-Tome. See, I'm currently overseeing many technical cooperation projects for sustainable tourism development in Asia, Middle East, Latin America, and Africa. And I'm very happy that I can be a part of this great side event. And I would introduce the toolkit of indicators for tourism projects. And so next slide, please. Yes, so this is a standardized approach to measure the impact of tourism projects on all sustainable development goals, which was developed in collaboration with UN Tourism, JICA. And it was completed last year. And but before that, in 2018, JICA carried out a study with which we analyzed 208 tourism projects across countries and examined the contribution of tourism development projects to achieve the SDGs. So this study revealed that the tourism sector and tourism projects are significant in economic and social environment aspects. And the tourism indeed brings immense opportunities to contribute to all the SDGs, such as increasing foreign currency, create job creation, promote entrepreneurial activities, and so on. So next slide, please. So I just mentioned the significance, and however, there's also a negative side to it, such as overseas outflow of earnings, and also environmental destructions and increasing crimes and so on. So, we now need to evaluate the tourism development project objectively, but we're having a difficult time to evaluate so far. And there are many cases that valid indicators are not set before the implementation of the project. So that is why we, JICA and UN Tourism, created these tips. So next slide, please. So you can find many indicators in these tips, and those indicators can help measure progress and assess the impact of tourism development project and provide evidence of their effectiveness in achieving their intended goals and promote the sharing understanding of how the tourism sector can most effectively contribute to the SDGs and implementation of SDGs for tourism sector. So next slide, please. So TIPS was created to bridge this gap to help to support the reporting of all levels and different levels such as and size of the project. The toolkit can be used by any type of stakeholders for entity, including the public sector at all levels of governance, the private sector, academia, civil society organizations, destination management organization, local communities, associations. So next slide, please. And inside tips, you can find a visual aid. And I have heard that this visual aid was promoted by Miss Claudia while we were making tips last year. So next, and it is highlighting interlinkage of targets with other goals and with themes selected. So I think this mapping can be utilized not only by the tourism sector, but by all sectors when we want to clarify each sustainable development goals interconnected. Next slide, please. Let us see in more practical manner on how the toolkit can be used. And imagine you're creating a project that aims to implement crisis management and disaster risk reduction strategy in mountainous village through sustainable tourism practices. The next slide, please. And in a practical manner, you can apply tips when you conduct community workshop using tip indicators related to community engagement. You can also develop international informational materials such as brochures, posters with content explaining disaster risks. And also you can establish community forums guided by tips to discuss local vulnerabilities, share knowledge, and create action plans. So next, please. So this toolkit currently available in English and Japanese. And the material created including the video may be found in the Tourism for Sustainable Development Goals platform. And this can be accessed through this QR code on the slide. And that's all for me. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sao Tome, for sharing with us this very practical approach, no, to tracking the progress that is being made in the tourism sector. Now, my dear speakers, we're coming to the end of this panel. As I warned you earlier, I will be asking each one of you to give us one concrete recommendation that you could give SIDS governments and the international community that they can take now to supercharge the SIDS path to resilient prosperity and sustainable development. I'll give you each 10 seconds to summarize. Alessandra, let's start with you.
Sorry. Yeah, basically, I mean, I think that for small island development states, the issue of climate change has become at the forefront and needs to be taken into account. So there is a need to fill the data gaps that are related to that link in particular climate change to economic activities, in particular tourism, which is one of the main activity in the islands. I think there is a need to provide increasing support to develop data that can support policies that address issues related to climate change, and in particular, I mean, considering that we are looking at forward-looking risks and develop policies now that can support, that can address the risks in the future. I think we need to be really strategic on the data that is being developed, but in particular then using the data to inform the policies to address these risks.
Yep, absolutely. Ed, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. More of the same. Effective leadership requires reliable data. Effective leadership requires reliable data. And so we must invest to close this data gap and invest in research leadership in order to use that data, mobilize that data wisely and well. Those investments will pay dividends in abundance later on.
Brilliant. Mr. Sao Tome, what's your take?
Yes. So we need to think the tourism development projects not only for tourism sector, but all that I think we need to measure the impact of the tourism projects, and that's when the tips comes in, and we can contribute to that the measurement of the impact. So, and also JICA is now stepping into the tourism resilience and crisis management to assist the sustainable tourism development in especially the vulnerable regions, small island development states, which is vulnerable to natural disaster and climate change. So we would like to focus more on the disaster risk management, including the tourism resilience. So my colleague will explain the details of the project in the next session. So thank you very much.
Yeah, some very excellent points. Thank you very much for that. So ladies and gentlemen, we've learned a lot of things, and one of them is also that if we want to go far, we need to go together. So charting the course towards a resilient prosperity in SIDS with the help of trusted data also very much needs to be a concerted effort. Our speakers have shown us that they are leading the way in this, and hopefully soon not having the data will no longer be an excuse for not doing better. Thank you very much. And with a round of applause, I hand it back to my colleague, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Clara, Ed, Alessandra, June, for these lovely presentations. So we are really running out of time a little bit here. So I think panel 2 colleagues, it's for us to keep up the timing. We're moving to try to give you the other side of the coin. So we have heard what we are doing to have a 360 approach to measuring tourism, and now we want to try to answer the question, why do we need this 360 approach to measuring tourism sustainability? Therefore, we're going to start immediately with my colleague, Sandra Carvão, who is the Chief of Tourism Market Intelligence and Competitiveness at the World Tourism Organization since 2018. And before that, she was Chief of Communication Publications for 8 years and also responsible for UN Tourism Strategic Positioning. I'm going to cut a little bit on the presentations. We'll have the bios available, so let's try to here to save some time. Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Claudia. No need for big introductions, definitely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today and contribute to the discussion. I'll go straight to my presentation because, as Claudia said, we are running out of time. And I don't want to contribute to the more adding to that delay. So very briefly, I'm going to share, I would say, 3 elements to the discussion. One is the current impact and recovery of tourism in SIDS, complementing some of the data that my colleague Clara shared. And then looking into, if we deep dive into communities, how can we use data to better have policies that help steering that sustainable and inclusive model that we aim at. Just to give you an idea, and Clara briefly touched upon it, our estimates for the global impact of tourism in SIDS have obviously be extremely affected by the pandemic. As you can see, down into 2020, in the peak of the pandemic, the international tourist arrivals in SIDS went down from 52 to 16, with the consequent impacts that Clara also mentioned in employment and in exports. As you can see here, the tourism receipts also went significantly down. We have seen a consistent recovery, much in line with what we've seen around the world, although it diverses very much from group of SIDS to another group of SIDS, and I'll share that in a moment. But currently, our estimates to the end of the year results is that we are currently 9% below in the SIDS compared to the level of 2019. So the recovery has been sustained after an impact of 70%, as you can see in 20 and 21. If we go a little bit deeper into the different groups of SIDS, actually, we do see that it has been the SIDS in the Pacific area who have taken longer to recover. And this is much linked to the fact that many of the source markets in Asia Pacific opened only in 2023, taking longer than to have the positive impact of that opening in the SIDS in the Pacific. We do see that the Caribbean actually is, as a group within SIDS, the group that has currently recovered the most. They're almost by the end of last year at the same level of pre-pandemic. And this has much to do also with different policies regarding the openness during the pandemic and immediately in the recovery. As Clara also mentioned, SIDS have a high impact in terms of their exports of tourism. It varies very substantially from SIDS to SIDS, naturally, depending on their economic structure. But if we exclude Singapore, which has a totally different economic structure, the group of SIDS is estimated to have, in 2023, have tourism representing around 38% of their total exports. So this is an immense percentage and also an important dependence of the sector that really propel us to make sure that we create resilience and sustainability among the SIDS. This is the data that's currently available for the SIDS. If we include Singapore, that share would go down to 7%. As you can see, it's quite relevant, the impact of tourism in exports. This also has a little bit the same way as recovered. If we compare the data with pre-pandemic, we're still not in the same levels. The group of SIDS with the exclusion of Singapore currently has 38%, where before the pandemic it was around 43%. Again, the same by the groups. As you can see as well, the recovery in the Caribbean is close. 31% of their share is due to tourism. And here also a striking difference between the group of SIDS in terms of the weight of tourism in their trade. So also it is important to know when we look at the SIDS that obviously there are common features, but there's also significant differences among them in terms of economic structure and in terms of the weight of tourism. Going forward to 2024, our first estimates for the first quarter of this year indicate that SIDS in terms of international tourist arrivals might be very close to pre-pandemic levels at -1%, where actually the world is currently at -3%. This is our projection globally for international tourist arrivals in 2024. UN Tourism estimates that we will fully recover pre-pandemic levels, not in all regions, but at the global level, and that numbers might actually overcome those of pre-pandemic by around 2%. Just to share with you as well, we run a regular survey among a group of experts to understand the factors that impact tourism recovery. I wanted to share this because I think all of them naturally have a huge impact on SIDS, but particularly factors 2 and 3, higher transport and accommodation costs, because we know that SIDS naturally depend from their tourism perspective on air transport, but also the importance of extreme weather events. Experts have been increasingly noticing the importance that extreme weather events have on tourism decisions, on tourists' choice of destination, but also on the recovery of destinations themselves. So those are 2 factors that are very much on top for the coming months. Also the economic environment, and this also affects SIDS naturally because we're talking on long-haul travel, which generally when there is an economic constraint situation will be less preferred as compared to short and closer destinations. So just to finalize as well, as we talk about the importance of data to actually understand what is happening in the market and the short term, and also to have a close monitoring so that we can act in correctness of policies, but also in marketing strategies and in partnerships. UN Tourism has developed during the pandemic dashboard that's available online. It's called the Recovery Tracker. And this is just as an information, this is the area related to data on the Caribbean, where you can actually follow on a monthly basis the data available for, in this case, international tourist arrivals, actual reservations as well, and occupancy rates at hotels. So as you can also see, there is a very, very high link and correlation between the trend lines, which shows that also some of the advanced indicators that we can get from big data in terms of forward-looking bookings, forward-looking trends are also very important for us to actually act on tourism. So going from the more global level to the local level, I'd like to highlight 2 of our projects in which data has become extremely relevant and that can be replicated specifically for SIDS. One is our Tourism for Rural Development program. It aims to disperse demand, and we know that in the case of SIDS, one of the big challenges is the concentration of demand in a specific group of products. So being able to create new products is critical. And for us, what was more interesting is within our Best Tourism Villages project, in which actually we have only 2 for the moment in the SIDS. We have Le Morne and Old Camport in Mauritius. What we have done is, although it's a process of candidacies by communities and villages, we have analyzed all the candidacies to understand where do they perform better in the evaluation that the advisory board that we have does of the villages. And we've seen there's a major challenge at local level on social sustainability. So the action at the community level to actually promote social sustainability and environmental sustainability, but also economic sustainability. Generally, they will do that well in cultural and natural resources and infrastructure, and the integration of the value chain, even in health and safety and security. So here, there's a lot of information and data that can guide us into the future. We've also launched recently a tool for local communities in rural areas, which actually aims to provide them a self-assessment procedure where they can evaluate themselves by choosing their situation and see where they are in terms of governance, in terms of tourism development, environmental sustainability, economic, social, and cultural. All of this will be available to us to also have that information and gear our projects better. And finally, just to mention as well, following up the colleague from Japan presentation, we're currently launching a small grants program, which we also aim to deploy just for SIDS with a specific call in the future. But where we are using and we are planning to implement from the beginning the use of tips to ensure that all our projects on the ground can actually be measured in terms of impact in line with the SDGs. So very much this would be what I'd like to share with you today. And just to end with a key message, as Claudia asked us to share, I think my recommendation would be to enlarge the scope of partnerships. We've heard from the colleague of IMF the importance of open data, big data sources. I think there's a huge opportunity, particularly in SIDS, to create a data partnership among different stakeholders that allows us to tap into new data and understand better on the short term and on the prospects and forecasting capacity, what the data can tell us. So Claudia, that's all from my side. I hope I was not too quick speaking, but thank you so much, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing this this time. I think there is a question for you in the question and answers, and I invite everyone to put your questions in that feature or share with us your thoughts and the recommendations in the chat. Now I pass to our next panelist, Ms. Tomomi Sato. She's an associate expert on private sector development group, economic development department of JICA. She has been in charge of projects on sustainable tourism development and MSMEs, especially in Latin America region. And she has been a big partner, a contributor to our Tourism for SDGs platform content and the toolkit of indicators for projects, tips, since she's joined this team. Tomomi, maybe I should tell the colleagues, if we please put your camera so you can talk. Mr. Sautomo mentioned that tips already exist in English and Japanese, and we are happy to announce that in a couple of weeks we will be also available in Spanish. Thank you, Tomomi. So tell us from your perspective, from the perspective of JICA, why do we need this 360 approach to measuring sustainability of tourism?
Hi, thank you so much, Claudia, for the introduction, and I am really happy to be able to contribute to this amazing opportunity of the side event of the SIDS International Conference. Okay, can you go next? Since I didn't expect that we are going to be out of the time, but it's good that I moved today's main message to the beginning. So I want to deliver 2 messages. One is, if we cannot measure our thing, we cannot improve it. And And since if we cannot evaluate ourselves and recognize how much we are sustainable or how much we are not sustainable, we cannot improve because we cannot know where we are standing. And also everyone talks about sustainable development goals recently, but sometimes when it comes to implementing sustainability development goals itself, sometimes it is too big or vague for some people, but the tips I think can help to visualize practically how much your tourism projects are sustainable and contribute to SDGs. And the second message is that we need to accessible way to get and monitor and analyze data. Yeah. And from my side, I will introduce what JICA do for sustainable tourism development and how we can utilize tips into each project that we are currently doing. Can you go next? Yeah. So we are running out of the time, so I will skip the basic explanation, but let me explain really briefly our organizational strategy in order to mobilize a wider range of resources to tackle global issues as JICA. We have set JICA global agenda, let's say like organizational strategy to identify medium to long-term objectives and initiatives for global issues toward more strategic cooperation. And here I want to say that the sustainable tourism development for sure is included in the global agenda. And can you go next? And here again, currently we are preparing sustainable tourism strategy is under preparation. Can you go next? And before, as Mr. Saotome has introduced tips, we introduced tips in 2023. 2023 and in English and in Japanese, and as Claudia introduced in the beginning, the Spanish version of tips is going to be published in a couple of weeks, and the toolkit can be customized in any project. It doesn't matter the size or the length of the project, and when we can use it, whenever we want to use it, we can utilize tips from the construction of tourism infrastructure to community-based project in order to measure the impact on contribution to SDGs or economic effect or environmental impact or awareness raising of community. And here I want to introduce one example of the project that we are currently doing. So we are currently doing a tourism resilience program for the Caribbean country, especially in Jamaica. So the program is about sharing experience and knowledge and strengthening partnership with Caribbean countries on tourism crisis management. And we are sharing experiences and knowledge of coping with the tourism crisis among Caribbean countries, and also we share Japan's experience on tourism disaster reduction and risk taking, and knowledge of coping with the tourism crisis with the training participants. In fiscal year 2024, training will be conducted in Jamaica in February 2025, focusing on the development of business continuity plans for tourism-related small and medium-sized enterprises. And last year, we have conducted the workshop and seminar in February 2024, and the outcome was reported during the Global Tourism Resilience Day conference in Jamaica. Can you go next? So there are maybe two reasons why JICA is implementing this program. So can you go back? Can you go next? Can you go next? Sorry, I'm skipping our properties. Can you go next? Yeah, so the first reason why we are implementing this program is that clearly the Caribbean is the most tourism dependent in the world. Travel and tourism account for 15% of Caribbean GDP and 13.8% of employment. Even though this is the data of 2019, but it's clearly that the Caribbean country is depending on the tourism sector, and also not only tourism sector, but all of the sector in the Caribbean country. And the second reason why JICA is implementing this program, can you go next? Thank you. Japan is the top donor of disaster risk reduction for yeah. Can you go next? So here I want to briefly explain that even though this program is focused on the tourism resilience in the Caribbean, we utilizing tips, we can include some other indicators that can evaluate the contribution of this program, for example, environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social sustainability. Even though we are focusing on one theme, maybe there is a possibility that that project can contribute to other sustainability component, for example, community engagement and empowerment. Of course, we need to include community into the crisis management and risk reduction when it comes to the tourism sector and tourism companies, so we can evaluate how much this project can contribute to community engagement empowerment by utilizing tips. It's sad that we cannot explain more detail how we can utilize tips actually, but if you go to the website that Claudia shared on the comment, we can go to the special website that prepared for tips, and you can check the introduction and brief explanation how we all can utilize tips in practical manner. Can you go next? And again, this is the final slide of my presentation. So the first message is, if we cannot measure a thing, we cannot improve it. So we need to get data, even if it's a small number of data. It's important to get the data to see the change of the things. And the second message is that we need to accessible way to get, monitor, and analyze data. Yeah, thank you so much for listening my presentation, and I will give my mic to Claudia.
Thank you, Tomomi, for the presentation and running so quickly through everything you could tell us. Now I pass to David Albertani. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Catalytic Finance Foundation. He leads the efforts in setting up new blended financial vehicles dedicated to sustainable infrastructure and oversees technical assistance implementation from Catalytic. Among other programs, David has been leading the setup of a subnational climate fund, targeting the implementation of a blended finance vehicle for subnational sustainable infrastructure, and he's also successfully managed a waste management program in Algeria, which got him official recognition from the Algerian authorities.
Don't need to read everything.
No. I'm going
Claudia.
to leave. There is a lot more to learn about David, so please consult the website of the event where you have there his bio, but also of the other panelists. So David, from Catalytic perspective and from your experience, why do we need this 360 perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, and thanks a lot for organizing this event. I think it's indeed, as all the panelists already said, very welcomed, and definitely ecotourism is today a big topic, and so we're very pleased to be here today with you. So maybe just as a very quick introduction, as Claudia mentioned, so Catalytic Finance Foundation, what we do is first we incubate investment vehicle and we blend them public and private money. And so we have actually created with Pegasus Capital Advisor investment fund, which is called the Subnational Commitment Fund, which Natalie, the next speaker, will speak about in a few minutes. And just wanted to mention, to raise attention, because the Subnational Commitment Fund can invest in ecotourism solutions. And so this is also why we're very interested into that sector. We at Catalytic, so there is the investment fund that invests in equity, and Natalie will speak about it. But the other topic that we do is we manage technical assistance grant money in order to support project preparations. And so we do that in various sectors, energy, and of course also ecotourism. So I think when you mentioned the data of the importance of data, I think for this work that we do on our day-to-day, which is develop new projects of ecotourism in SIDS and other countries, as you rightly mentioned, if we don't know how to measure things or what's the baseline and what are the good benchmarks, it is very hard to design a good project and to see what is a good ecotourism, which will bring positivity for the communities, for climate, being adapted. So I think the importance of data on our daily work is really to make sure that we have the good benchmark, we have the best practice, and we know how to deploy technical assistance so that we are able to design the best project. So, in that sense, we really welcome the work that UN World Tourism Organization has done, also with JICA and the University of Oxford. And we are currently commissioning a white paper to see on the design of, for instance, two of the facilities we are currently designing in Galapagos and Indonesia, how, with those ESG and SDG indicators, the design we've already done, can be improved, and maybe the impact can be improved. So we really welcome this work and really want to put ourselves, being a user of this work. I also wanted to mention, on the point that you said, why it is important. I think we all have to be aware, and I think most of us know it. JICA is very, not unique, but, deeply involved into sustainable tourism, but not every DFI and NDB is. And most of the time, and unfortunately, sometimes sustainable ecotourism, is not always seen for its positive benefit. And people only see the flights or the travel, and they mostly focus on the negative externalities of tourism. And I really welcome JICA, who sees through that. And I think this is also where I believe, and also a lot of a recommendation, when measuring the impact, of course, we need to measure safeguards, and there is a thorough work that is being done to not destroy the ecosystem, to have the best safeguards we can have. But I think we should also put a bit of focus on all the positive externalities that ecotourism bring. The jobs, the economic development, and it can also bring conservation. And I think this is really also part of the white paper, and what we want to promote is how ecotourism can also be seen for its positive externalities. And I would really welcome, as a recommendation, also SIDS to really, when looking at the impact of ecotourism, of course, not forgetting about the safeguards and not destroying the ecosystem. That's the main KPI, but also looking at the positive externalities of ecotourism and what ecotourism, when done properly, can also bring as economic and prosperity. And so I will try to be very short because I know we're running out of time. And anyway, Natalie, the next speaker, will discuss more deeply into the SCF, which is the program we're working together on. Thank you again for inviting me, and looking forward to the readouts.
Thank you, David, and thank you so much for being mindful of the time. Natalie, well, we have heard the name of Natalie now. She's Natalie Gartman, who is the ESG and Impact Manager of Pegasus, and tasked with the integration across Pegasus investment activities and supporting portfolio companies achieve sustainable development impacts. Natalie, I'm sorry, I'm not going to dwell more in presenting you again. I invite you to check the biographies of our speakers. We might even put the document here attached to the in the chat. So from your perspective and from the work that you do at Pegasus, why do we need these, and what is your recommendation for the SIDS future? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Claudia and the team, to participate in this panel and for these interesting presentations from the other panelists, and also providing so many useful resources. For just to write in context for those who are not familiar with Pegasus, so we are an impact investing management firm focused on sustainable and inclusive growth, while also providing attractive returns for investors. And we currently manage 2 impact funds focused on the Global South, including the SIDS, and one is, as you heard, the Subnational Climate Fund, and the second one is the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, that both can invest into green infrastructure, ecotourism, waste management, and food security. And we believe that private capital plays a key role to address sustainable development issues, particularly in the SIDS, and investors should be contributing to the protection and conservation of nature and sustainable development. As said, in the SIDS, public financing is often limited or it's just not sufficient. So for us as an investor, this means that we need to prioritize investments that generate those sustainable development impacts and solve an existing issue, and ensure that those projects that we back and invest in are inclusive and environmentally sound. So to prove this thesis, and regarding your questions, that's why the impact measurement and data is absolutely critical and necessary. And we believe that ecotourism, if done correctly, with a holistic ecosystems approach focused on inclusivity, is a great sector to generate those measurable SDG impacts, including on prosperity, jobs, biodiversity benefits, and integrate solutions to address wider issues in the SIDS, such as food security, energy security, health and well-being of the local communities. Particularly in the SIDS, this is critical given as we heard in the beginning, the tourism is an important sector and millions of people work in the sector. And it's also one of the key major source of funding to preserve and regenerate nature and cultural heritage. However, as we also heard, sector is also known as a source of emissions and pollution that drive the climate crisis. And in turn, the climate crisis poses a serious threat to the industry through frequent storms, extreme heat, rising sea levels, and lead to devastating costs and impact for the SIDS, for instance, and the affected communities. And in the past and present, we have seen many bad examples on how tourism can be destructive and exploitive to people and nature. And that's why for us, it's so critical to measure our sustainability impact, to have good, reliable, and also periodical data systems in place that are not only backward looking, but can also inform design of the project and operations to ensure we get it right and we prove the thesis of also what David explained of the positive externalities and the importance of ecotourism. And with that, we also hope to attract investors to focus on these projects rather than the unsustainable ones. So that is why also the tips, for instance, is so critical for different stakeholders such as tourism operators, hotels, and investors like us. And it provides this framework and indicators to measure impact and even integrate them into design early on. And with our impact funds, we are currently developing 2 ecotourism projects in partnership with Six Senses, which is one of the leading global sustainability hotel brands. And one is in the Galapagos and one is in Grand Bahama. And our goal is to offer an alternative to carbon-intense tourism and an alternative to unsustainable consumption patterns. And we focus on increasing the ecosystem resilience and engage local communities and island inhabitants on climate mitigation, adaptation strategies, while still offering a best-in-class traveler experience. So I'm just going to highlight the two examples in a little bit more detail. So like SIDS, for instance, the Galapagos is also characterized by small population, remoteness, vulnerability to economic and environmental shocks. And there's a high reliance on imported food and tourism, of course, to sustain the economy. And also the Galapagos are threatened by non-native species and sometimes really aggressive invasive species. So therefore, our intervention, for instance, focus on the reduction of invasive species. We work with the National Park Service to remove invasive species and replant native species. And beyond the ecological restoration, the hotel, of course, will also provide livelihoods. We work with farmers and fishermen to support the local sourcing strategy. There's a zero plastic strategy, and also the water strategy aims to provide water to surrounding communities. And this came up during our consultation with the surrounding and local communities, that water supply is one of the key issues there. And of course, we work with, we don't do it by ourselves. We work with Catalytic to provide the capacity building, technical assistance, but then also the local NGO, Galapagos Rescue Foundation, through projects that ensure this environmental education, awareness, and species conservation. And we also organize cleanups to reduce the pollution on the islands. In the Bahamas, we're also working on an ecotourism resort in Grand Bahama specifically, that aims to also showcase a model in the Bahamas for sustainable tourism and restoration activities. Grand Bahama has been quite devastated by Hurricane Dorian in 2019. So our project is focused on sustainable design, sustainable operations, and community and nature impact. For instance, we use sustainable materials such as local materials. We have on-site renewable energy to cover more than 51% of the energy consumption by renewables. Also, the landscaping focused on native species and eradicating invasive species, and also to respond to climate adaptation and resilience. There's a storm protection design, different components such as the beach restoration, dune system, and also designing structures of the building that withstand like a hurricane and flood water in most extreme storms. And of course, also here we aim to have create opportunities for local jobs for local communities, women organizations that can provide products and services to the hotel. There's also the zero plastic policy, local sourcing, and in terms of impact, the hotel will also support the adjacent marine protected areas and coral reef restoration project close to the site. And for both investments, we use measurable indicators at design stage, but then also, of course, during development and operation. And those KPIs are actually aligned with the tips that we heard earlier in terms of local jobs created or jobs created for vulnerable groups, number of invasive species, and so on. So for us, by showcasing these measurable impacts, we hope to create like the proof case for a great impact investment for long-term sustainability that ultimately benefits the communities and nature. So also here regarding the recommendation, I think for us, we need to showcase how sustainable tourism can create social, environment, and so financial benefits through credible measurement systems and also storytelling based on this holistic ecosystem approach to address climate resilience, food and energy security, and the biodiversity benefits, while of course having the rigorous social and environmental safeguards in place, with the ultimate goal to really prove that this can work. And as we know for the SIDS, this is critical, and we also hope then to accelerate and attract other players and also other investors to tap into the sector. So I know that was very fast, but I was conscious of time. So thanks a lot for your attention, and back to you, Claudio.
Thank you so much, Natalie, and also with David to show us how everything is so related and so interconnected, and you cannot work on one thing without the other. Again, also to underline the need of data. Thank you also very much for the for staying a little bit more behind the time, beyond the time. Also to our participants online. We are going to close because we are already out of the 90 minutes of the event. But just to quickly wrap up, we will have available the recording of this session in YouTube, and we will include it in our website, the page of the web.
I think
believe we have lost Claudia.
Yes, I think Claudia's
Sorry.
frozen. Yeah,
There you are.
Okay, now I'm okay. I'm back. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm having a few issues also on the internet on my side. Probably it's the time telling me it's time to close and time to leave. We had quite intense 90 minutes. Thank you so much to everyone to have been part of it, to dedicating your time, not only to present, but also to listening to us. Again, the recording of YouTube will be available in the platform. We'll look into what is the issue that some of you are facing right now, and we hope that the discussion was interesting for everyone. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us via email. Clara, do you want to say something, or any of my co-hosts, co-presenters? Okay, so I think we can adjourn the session. We would say I'm just missing the close, and hope you have wonderful afternoon, day, or evening. Thank you so much to our colleagues that were connecting from the other side of the world, and they should be sleeping by now and resting. But have a great day and a good continuation of the SIDS conference. Take care. Yeah, bye bye.